All right, so we're going to go ahead and kick it off and jump into our panel discussion. So if you're just joining us, we've got four great panelists. We've got Amber Banks, Rob Thomas, Renee White, and Julia McDowell that are on our panel. And I'm Anna Zajewska. I'm the Executive Director for ABCLT. So again, if you're just joining us, welcome. We just watched a film called Segregated by Design, which is a summary of the book, The Color of Law. And you know, obviously for a lot of you out in the audience, you can tell that this is a really educational film, and that's part of the purpose here is to educate our community on what has happened in the past and the policies and the practices that have taken place, and really to understand that the neighborhoods were not segregated by happenstance, like the video is titled. They were segregated by design, right? And so I think for me, where I want to start the panel discussion is really talking about changing the narrative, and how do we, you know, acknowledge that it's important to tell the story that we just saw, but how do we also amplify the stories of those thriving Black communities that were destroyed during all of this urban renewal, urban removal, all the displacement that's happening now with the gentrification. So, you know, again, for me doing this work, it's really important to acknowledge the history and acknowledge the past and acknowledge that there were thriving communities and there were thriving businesses, Black businesses, schools, churches, residences, that were all there, and people didn't have to go out of the community to get their needs met, to, you know, go to the banking institutions, to go to church, to go to school. And so my first question to the panel is, again, how do we change the narrative to amplify those stories and to empower Black residents and Black businesses to really reclaim that success narrative and thrive like many communities have thrived, and of course there are many communities that still thrive, but how do we recreate that story? How do we tell it from that success perspective? So I'll open that up to the panelists, and Renee, you're on my screen next. I see you unmuted yourself, so why don't you kick us off?
I'll start us out. Actually, and growing up in East End, being a native of Asheville, I actually am the grandchild of a grandmother who went through urban renewal, who was actually living in a house in East End, Valley Street neighborhood community. And at the time of urban renewal, they came in and said that they wanted to purchase her home due to urban renewal and that she would have to move and relocate. And she did, long story short. But right now, currently, where the home was located is cement. There's nothing there. And so, of course, with urban renewal, the entire neighborhood changed. The entire East End Valley Street changed. We had Porter's store, we had grocery stores, we had schools, we had laundromats that were we had a boutique that was owned by Mrs. Thelma Porter, which were all Black thriving businesses at that time. Once the urban renewal happened and everything changed, East End no longer had those businesses. The schools, of course, are no longer there. And at this particular time, when I look at East End, it's in hopes that even with gentrification happening, it was in hopes that some of the people who live in the neighborhood could continue to stay in the neighborhood. Of course, with that, older family members dying out, relatives not being able to keep the properties. Therefore, we went through the gentrification process of where when the homes were purchased, they were purchased by Caucasians or people who were not of color. So, of course, East End now is very gentrified. Can an average Black American in the city of Asheville afford to purchase one of those homes once a developer comes in and restructures that home? No, because like I said, income is not conducive to be able to afford it. Can't get loans at the banks to be able to purchase it. So therefore, we get gentrification. And I think that right now, what needs to happen to change this is that we need to, with our city and county government, I've always, in the process of being president for the last 10 years, I've always had the big issue and concern with the fact that there was no communication or reaching out to these communities when decisions were being made about what was going to happen in the areas. And like the film said, you need diversity at the table. And generally there was no diversity there, because once something happened in those neighborhoods or in our neighborhoods, it happened without any of us being at the table. When I say us, that's people of color or Black people, Afro-Americans. Therefore, that left us with decisions being made by government that we were not aware of, and that once it happened, it was too late for us to even get in on the process to change anything, to have a voice in it. It happens, and so it already happened. City government had already decided this is what they were going to do. We were not at the table, and so this is what we have currently. That certainly needs to be something that changes right now. We don't want to be behind the process. We want to be included in the process and in the front of the process. And so I think that's a big issue that I have currently with government, that they don't try to include us. And so I'll let somebody else talk. I could go on and on.
Right. And for me, it's, you know, in addition to everything that you said, how do we also reflect on the history and capture those stories of those communities that were torn apart, and make sure that we've got them documented, and make sure that you know, those communities are not just historical markers, and they're not just paved over, like you said, they're not just concrete, they're not just parking lots, but there's kind of this memory of those thriving neighborhoods.
I actually think that that's going to take people. It's going to take the people who are currently still here in Asheville, who live in those neighborhoods. It's going to take us talking about those neighborhoods. There's been many documentary series done on East End and our predominantly Black neighborhoods. There are a lot of records on file about these neighborhoods. And I'm like you, I don't want us to just be markers. Of course, we can easily put up a marker and say that this was this street or this was this store. But what I would like to see happen, and I think we have to start talking more, and we have to start getting that type of information out into the community more, and especially with our generations that are coming up. I think it's imperative that they know what these neighborhoods represented, what we historically had in these neighborhoods, where we came from, and where we're going. So I think that talking and communication is one big key to changing that narrative and making sure that those histories are out there in the forefront.
Thank you, Miss Renee. Rob,
I also think
over to you.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Julia.
Can y'all hear me?
I can.
Yes, yes, Julia.
I guess not. Oh, I was just going to just add on with just folks being in the park. What we're doing is that we are trying to keep have people come up and tell. That will be docs have a video. We'll always have their voices, and so when this COVID is over, those are the things, some of the things that we're going to be doing in Triangle Park. Is also just keep history alive by taking videos and hearing people.
Julie, is
stories. So I
kind
think
of
that's a good
lost
way
you there.
to. I just guess I have a weak connection. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I'm been
It kind of, it's a bit better. So if you want to just tell us the last part that you said one more
Oh,
time, hear that.
okay. So turn off the video. All right. Okay, all I said was just that just folks, what we do in the park is that we're going to be start documenting stories. That way we'll have stories and videos and those type things like that. That way that they'll be documented and they will always be there too as well.
Thank you, Julia. That's great. That's definitely great work that you all are doing. And we really hope to be able to connect with you as you start and continue doing that work. Rob, I'm going to go to you for this question.
Yes. Miss Renee didn't leave a whole lot for me to really touch on. She really touched on everything beautifully, like the historical issues of community not being brought into the table, whereas you have individuals planning things for the community and not with the community, which is definitely a major issue that I myself and many individuals around me have identified. So it's like, how do you work on the narrative? Whereas a lot of the histories that we have here in Asheville have been, if not whitewashed, hidden from us. UNCA had an exhibit on urban renewal, the properties lost, and a lot of direct stories from individuals that actually lived in that era. And that exhibit is now down. From what I've been told, you have to now pay to access that information. And accessing individual deeds and records of who owned what, and that still does not tell the stories behind it. The emotional content, the oppression, the root shock that happens whenever a community of individuals build a community and then is uprooted several different occasions, which has a bunch of psychological issues also attached to it. So education on a massive scale definitely needs to happen around what all was perpetrated, how it was done, and on the scale that it was done on. I for one am a proponent for teaching the different issues of institutional, systemic, and structural racism in schools to counteract racism, to counteract the superiority complex that a lot of individuals possess, to whereas a lot of this superiority is based off of faulty knowledge. And I think that the same is true for individuals that don't think or feel as if people of color deserve some type of equity for the things that have been perpetrated upon us. I love the analogy of life is kind of like a Monopoly game, whereas this game has been going on over 400 years, and we've only recently been able to pull up a table. The property is bought. You gave us pretty much the same $500 that individuals got 400 years ago to start out with, and you're wondering why the first time around we end up bankrupt or in jail, as soon as we land on a property. So how would you fix that? How would you address that in a Monopoly game? I mean, you would obviously do it in an equitably level, whereas individuals would either be given property or a massive amount of money. Back to Ms. Renee's statement, that has been the major issue of our situation, to whereas community has not been brought into the table, community has not had a platform. And that is why I myself am honored to be a part of what is happening now. Because if you really read through the blueprint of what the resolution is, it actually creates a table, it creates a platform for the community so that they can come in and make decisions for themselves and not have false leadership or some cherry-picked individuals. I definitely advocating that they get to pick their own representatives to come into this table and decide their own planning, to whereas nothing has been planned, nothing has been created without community. Because early on, like I said, that's definitely the major thing that I've identified here, specifically locally to Asheville. You know, they have historically divided our neighborhoods up, giving one neighborhood something, another neighborhood something else, whereas we never used our collective force to better our situation as a whole. So yeah, back to how do you change the narrative is put it out there, put it on platforms, put it in newspapers, put it in media, put it on social media, put it on news, and communicate directly at ground level, foot to foot, you know, foot boots on the ground, so to speak. And that is extremely hard right now with coronavirus, you know, reaching individuals individually outside of the internet is a task, but it definitely has to be done at the end of the day. Everybody cannot be reached across the internet. And a lot of community organizing is definitely gonna have to take place.
Thank you, Rob. Yeah, that's so on point, and everything everyone has said is definitely part of the work that everybody on this panel is definitely doing. And you know, I immediately thought back to some of my community work, community organizing days in Charlotte, where the community would constantly say, you know, nothing for us without us, right? And so that's really what we're talking about here, involving the very communities that were affected by urban renewal and are still being affected by displacement, communities of color, and making sure that they are at the forefront, at the center of the decisions that are being made. And so I know we hadn't gotten to Amber, but I'm going to slightly shift to our next question and give Amber an opportunity to kind of chime in. The two are related, but we started talking a lot about you know, development and involving people, people of color, communities of color, especially in those conversations. And so my next question is really around city and county government, which has been mentioned a couple of times already. And so when city and county is planning housing and other developments in the city and county, how can we achieve equitable representation of people of color and communities of color in that decision-making process? And so, Amber, I want to turn to you with this question, but feel free to add if there's anything that you want to add to the previous question as well.
Yeah, I think this goes in conjuncture very well with what Renee and Rob and Julia have all said, that if people the most affected aren't there working from the start, the ground level of building the equity that we want to see, then the same patterns are going to be run into, where, you know, decisions are being made by, a lot of the time, cherry-picked folks. Like a lot of the decisions that the city council makes goes through subcommittees. So we really do need to have Black voices in every single one of those committees. And I would add probably people that are in the low scale. I mean, they're people that have money, and there's a lot of politicians, and I don't feel like that necessarily, I don't necessarily feel like that's getting at the heart of the issue. And as far as, I mean, I have some ideas for reparations myself, but I don't feel like it's necessarily my place to say anything about it. So the main thing, I think, is just to have, and allowing access as well. You know, there's only so many people that can be on these committees. So taping, you know, allowing more access for people to be able to be included in those meetings by allowing them to be streamed, video streamed, so people are really aware at every level of what's going on. There's no secret agenda that way.
Thank you, Amber. I'm going to go back to Julia on this one.
Well, I think the city or they should like forgive people. I mean, just like in my case, right now I'm not homeless, but I live in a real small room, a real small room. I'm trying to get into housing, trying to find an apartment. I went through mountain housing, um, and I fill out applications. Everything went all right. I'm on the waiting list. But when this new place came out, East Haven, for some reason, East Haven found something that was 20 years ago. I mean, come on now. So they had to find something to keep me out of there. And that's fine. That's fine. But that shouldn't be okay. I mean, evictions or stuff that's in the past, they should forgive certain things, just like when you do your credit thing. After 7 years, things go off. Why it can't happen with the city or the county? I mean, it's not fair. It's not fair. And if they want to do anything, help me. Help me get into an apartment so they won't be holding stuff against me, like past evictions. I mean, I can't remember. Only place I can remember that I've ever been thrown out of was Mountainside. And I didn't get thrown. I mean, we got put out of Mountainside because they tore it down. I mean, if they want to do something, help me. That's all I'm asking the government to do. I mean, that's the way they can help me. Me being in my spot. Just help me try to get out of here and stop holding the past against you. I know they say the past come, but certain things in the past, you can let it go. I mean, it can't be that bad. I mean, Mountainside been gone 8 years, 7 to 8 years. Come on. Even if it's Mountainside, I don't know what it was, but I'm just saying certain things they shouldn't hold against you. The county or the city shouldn't hold against you, and they should just eliminate it. And if they say they want to help out that. Not just me. I'm sure it's a lot of people in my place that will feel the same way. Just make it easier.
And I'd like to comment on that also, because the thing of it is we can have development, but we have development here with displacement. And when people are displaced, they have nowhere better to go. And so I think that's a big issue here in this city also, and within our neighborhoods, that we're getting displaced, and it's not being displaced to something better, even comparable almost to what people had. And so nobody's looking at the fact that you've got all this building, all of this going on, and we can't even afford to move in it, live in it, rent it, and anything else. So I think that's a big issue for me, and that's something that really needs to be looked at.
Thank you, Renee, and thank you, Julia. And a couple of just reactions real quick to what you two just said. I mean, one of the key things that Renee, you just said is development without displacement. And from the Community Land Trust perspective, that is definitely something that we can and will work to address. And that is, something that we're really here to make sure happens, that we develop, whether it's housing or other types of development, we develop that infrastructure, but we don't displace people. And the other point that you two brought up is making sure that if people are displaced, the city and the county and other organizations do everything in their power to bring people back. And so, people are going out to the county, people are going to surrounding counties, people are moving to different cities altogether, right? But in Julia's case, and others who have been displaced, making sure that those people are prioritized when new projects are being built and there is new housing, and making those connections. And the other thing I'll say real quick that came to mind is, in instances where people are having to look for housing, having to work full-time jobs, having to work multiple jobs, people aren't able to get to all of these committees and have their voices be heard. And so we really need to continue building this movement where the process is inclusive and is equitable, and we are amplifying everyone's voices, even people who are not able to be in the room, who are sometimes, and a lot of the times, the ones that are most impacted by the very conversations happening in that room. So I just wanted to add that. I'm Rob.
Something else there.
Go ahead, Amber. You raised your hand. Go ahead.
I wanted to add that in the 10 years that I've gone from housing to housing, because for me, I did have misdemeanors in my past that have held me back. And therefore, I'm pushed into, getting roommates because they don't do any kind of background checks. And then you're not really getting anything based on your income. So you're paying pretty steep prices. One organization that I know does really well, I think needs to be broadened. And I think if people could get caseworkers, Homeward Bound does good things, but they do it when people have gone through literally living on the streets homeless, and they have invaluable access to knowing the tricks of the trade, of knowing what it takes to get into housing, how to get around the things that have held you back. And they really, kind of act as a therapist along the process. And if there was any way to widen that, I think that it would do wonders for folks.
Absolutely. Thank you, Amber.
And can I chime in just a second on that too? Because another thing I'd like to say about that, and that, I guess it goes into play with these reparations that's going on. I don't see anybody, even with the city passing the reparation city council, I don't see anybody contacting East End saying, Renee, we've got 20 parcels of land over there. Would you all like it? This whole reparation thing, all well and good, but we're still in a fight. It's not like that there was reparations passed, and it's not anybody's coming out saying, we're here, East End, here's the land that we have here, and we're gonna give this to you. It's not like we have anybody saying, put your business there, we're gonna help you get the capital money to build it, to put you another store over in your neighborhood. So I'm a little, reparations, okay, but nothing's happening, and it's certainly not happening fast, that says to me that we're still not gonna be in a struggle and a fight to get anything in the city of Asheville that's gonna help anybody with housing, jobs, education, or anything else. So I'm just a little concerned about these reparations and where it's going, because it's not happening too fast. Like I said, nobody's running out saying, here, Burton Street, here, East End, here, Shiloh, here's what you need. We're going to give you this and move forward.
Right. Thank you, Renee. And of course, at least me personally, I'm anticipating that this might be a slow process, but that doesn't mean that the community should be waiting. The community should be planning and getting ready and making the demands, right? Like Rob has already been doing. So really great segue to go to Rob. And Rob, if you want to chime in on anything that's been said, please feel free to do so. But, turning to the topic of reparations, and specifically the topic of what do we do now to make sure that we're ready when the city and county are ready for us, making sure that we are upfront and asking for what the community wants. How do we make that happen? How do we start that?
Yes. I know this is supposed to be centered around housing and the question you asked, but I really do honestly want to address Ms. Renee White's concerns, because she shares the same concern as a lot of individuals of our community. To whereas, to be honest, they have every right in the world to be skeptical of this policy. To whereas every other promise the city has given us, it has defaulted and not produced anything. So I completely get it. Also, I want her to take a look at the statements that she made preceding, to whereas she stated that community needs to be brought in on a massive scale. I want you to understand the time that will actually take as far as organizing community and doing it on such a massive scale, to whereas that right there is a major task and requires a major plan as well, right? So the plan is to bring community into the table, and that's as far as my plan goes. The community creates the rest of the plan, and I support them in any form and fashion that I can, that they plan gets implemented. you know, to whereas the community, like I said, community needs to be put forth first and heard first. I also want her to look at another part of what she said. Like nobody has come in and say, here you go, East End, or here you go, Shiloh. Nah, this don't need to go that way. This needs to go as East End and Shiloh, Burton Street, PVA, Hillcrest need to create what it is that they need and say, look, this is what we need, instead of getting some handouts as what's been going on historically here in Asheville. And you know, that's what it is that I am trying to move toward. Myself and the other individuals around me is bringing you all to the table, and the table is created specifically for you all, and to cut out the middleman, cut out false leadership, cut out having to go through a nonprofit, cut out having to get someone to advocate for you, but each respective community, like I said, I would hope that right now you are organizing yourselves in a form and fashion to know who it is that you want to represent yourselves within this committee. And then my role is to support and make sure that that happens for you so that you can speak for yourselves. So like, I know that I've spoken with Ms. Sophie and Brandon Mays, and I haven't spoken with Ms. Bobette yet, but I have spoken with individuals in Shiloh, and I'm familiar with a lot of the concerns they have is around education and what's happening right now specifically. And there are other things that their community needs. But what I'm getting at is what I told them, like, look, as far as me as an individual, like I will not be getting anything implemented for a community, because that's what's happened here historically. You know, you have these individuals that say they represent everybody and do as they will, so to speak. Like, no, my plan is to bring you all into the table and have you all get your own plans implemented. You are the community experts because you live in each individual community. You know what is best for your community. This should not be a bunch of individuals behind closed doors creating plans for your community. You know, and this whole thing has just started. Like, you know, there's no way that we would go from 30 days after resolution to parceling out land and resources when land and resources still has to be attached to what it is, the structure that has been created, which is the committee, which creates the empowerment for the community for Black Asheville. And also, you know, man, we're Black people. Nothing in our life has been easy, and this is not going to be easy. This is going to be a fight every step of the way. For everything that the community asks for, I plan on having to use the full force of myself and several other people and organizations and individuals around me to advocate and to keep a spotlight on what it is that you all want, to make sure that it gets passed and implemented. That is the difference between now and historically. Historically, it's been done in shady back rooms. Now we have a spotlight on it. We have national attention, and I plan on weaponizing every word within that document.
Rob, I need to address that for 1 second. Number one, Burton Street, East End, and Shiloh are all part of a collaborative together. We all came together. This has been going on. East End, I've been president for 10 years. So it's not like what we've been fighting for. The stuff that you all are talking about now, we've been fighting for all these years. So the next thing is that our 3 neighborhoods, we are very clear on what we want and what we need. That's not the issue. And yeah, sure, we've been fighting. We've been singing "We Shall Overcome" for many, many years, and we haven't overcome yet. But the thing of it is that our 3 historical Black neighborhoods are at the forefront with the city, county, and many other entities that know that we exist, and they know what we want and what we are expecting to try to get from these organizations or the city, county, or whoever it may be. So sure, we are willing to work with you, of course. We all hope that we can all come together and work this thing as one big collaborative community. But when we're looking, I'm on the Asheville-Buncombe County Land Trust as vice president. I've been working with them since they started in 2018, simply because I'm watching how the houses in East End Valley Street Neighborhood Association are being taken away from or can't be held onto by our Black residents who lived here. like I said, I'm a native of Asheville and an East End. I grew up in East End. I went from East End to Mountainside Apartments and then to Mack Street. So I've ran East End in a full circle. So yeah, I'm quite aware that things don't happen overnight. Sure, we know this because we've been in this fight for a long time. But my concern is that if they want to make it right, it shouldn't take us 20 more years to get it right. If Julia needs a place to stay right now, she should be able to get one. Things need to move a little faster than what I'm seeing them move. I mean, this is stuff that's already been in the making. It's not like this is anything new. The city knows what they've done to Black people. The county knows what they've done to Black people. And it's no secret. And a lot of behind the closed door conversations were held amongst them. And that's why we're in the shape that we're in now. So I understand what you're saying. And sure, we're all going to try to work together on this. But please understand that we've been in this for quite some time.
Yes, ma'am. And, you know, I don't want to turn this into a debate because
Right.
I love you, Miss Renee. I'm a native of Asheville too. I'm very, very familiar with your legendary presence here. Yes, ma'am. At the same time, you know, what is so frustrating for me is like everybody's saying they want things done fast, and then like this move was done so that it would be fast, and then everybody's like, well, why you didn't contact us? And it's like, okay, you got to look at the move. The move is to open the door so that you all have a way broader platform. I'm very familiar with the associations of Shiloh, Burton Street, and East End, whereas y'all are the final remaining historical Black communities in Asheville. I know that y'all have had a seat at the table, so to speak, for a long time in Asheville. But now it's like everything has been exponentially amplified to whereas things that you all have asked for in the past could possibly get implemented with little to no effort. And that's the beauty of this moment in time right now. So whereas you and I well know 90 days ago, 4 months ago, nobody cared about the state of a Black person in Asheville. You know, there was no awareness. If we would have tried to say anything about reparations 4 months ago, wouldn't have happened. Like I said, this is a starting point, and I highly doubt that it's going to take 20 years to see some results out of it. But I do think that it will be going on for 20 years, and we will still be pulling things out of it. And you know, at the end of the day, it's about all of us coming together, which is going to be a huge task on its own. Like you said, you've already got the answers to your neighborhoods. So a lot of you all are already prepared, but this is also more than East End, Burton Street, and Shiloh, to whereas our most vulnerable populations live within public housing. You know, Hillcrest, Riverview, PVA, these are the places that have been left out of the conversation, the individuals that do not get to accrue generational wealth. And we're trying to figure out solutions on a massive scale and have representatives do this from a wide array of communities. So whereas, you know, everybody needs assistance. I mean, I hear Miss Julia, you know, I'm in a similar situation. You know, me, myself, I'm a native of Asheville, North Carolina. I also I'm 33 years old. I spent 11 years of my life incarcerated. There is no property manager in town that I can get a lease on, no matter how much I've changed, no matter how much money I make. So that equates to, with me and my wife, we have 4 children together. So there's 2 of us. So we would need a house with 4 or 5 bedrooms. Now, for us to be able to qualify for this type of housing, both of our incomes need to be accounted for. If me, first of all, being on a lease, and this isn't even talking about a mortgage, because there are several instances and complications we go through when trying to get a mortgage for a house. We're just talking about leasing a house that we need for our size. We are stuck inside of a 3-bedroom apartment because my income cannot be verified. She also has student loan debt, whereas I'm also a contract employee, to whereas I need to show and prove that for 2 years. But even just with me trying to lease an apartment or lease a house, not apartment, a house that would fit the size and the needs of my family is almost impossible, because they will not, if my name is on the lease agreement, I'm pretty much automatically disqualified. Now, off her income alone, that is not gonna qualify us to be able to pay our rent. So we are stuck in an apartment, 3-bedroom apartment, and we've been trying to fix the situation for a year and a half. Hopefully by next year, we'll have some things figured out, but we're all stuck in this oppressed situation. I promise you. So, I mean, it's like, just think, if I didn't have someone that I was with, that I was in a relationship with, that I couldn't live with, I would pretty much be homeless, because nowhere is gonna rent to me unless, you know, I maybe can get a trailer somewhere on the outskirts, a town somewhere. You know, I may be able to get something like that, but as far as adequate housing, like, I can't do that.
And thank you, Renee. I just am looking at the clock. Want to make sure we have enough time for some Q&A from the audience, but I also do just want to comment on some of the things that you two just mentioned, is that, you know, we're really just barely scratching the surface of this right now. We only have a limited amount of time, and it's really helpful to hear those experiences from all of you on the panel, and we definitely have to continue the conversation. We have to make sure that we're having those conversations in different spaces. So thank you for offering all of that, and just know that I want to keep this conversation going, but I also want to hear from the audience a little bit. And so I'm going to shift to our last question for the panel, and then we'll take Q&A from the audience. I saw a couple come in, but I haven't seen too many yet. So something that I think touches on Renee and Rob, both of what you all have been saying, what resonates a lot with me in the work that ABCLT is trying to do moving forward is collective impact. And I definitely hear and know that a lot of work has happened and still is happening. And Renee, you all have been working for decades on this, and Rob, you have been in your circles as well, right? But what I really want to see, and a lot of this is already happening, but I'd like to see it even amplified more, is how can we all come together and collaborate? Because I think for this to really happen, and for us not to have to wait another 20 years for action to happen, everyone is going to have to come together, right? And so the video mentioned that, you know, segregation impedes our political and economic success. And I think that if people across different races, ethnicities come together and really advocate, really work collectively, different neighborhoods, different groups, nonprofits, there's so many people out there working on this, how that can happen faster, and how it can happen in a timeline that really speaks to what Renee is saying, so that we do see some of that change happening. And so I do want to give Amber and Julia a chance to chime in, but I want to hear a little bit from everybody on how, you know, how can we create spaces and places where diverse groups can collaborate and work together, and create more integrated neighborhoods where especially people of color can thrive. And maybe you can give some examples from the work that you've been doing where people have been coming together or groups have been coming together. But I also really want to hear about how can many different groups who are maybe collaborating with one or two other groups, how can we come together? And you know, there's power in numbers. So how do we get that power, and how do we all kind of walk the same path to achieve the goals that we want to go to? So I'm gonna go to Amber, and then I'm gonna go to Julie, and then Rob and Renee. I'll come back to you guys.
I think most simply, trust is needed. So base building, and because there, like you said, there are a lot of nonprofits and organizations and a lot of groups getting behind efforts for things that are affecting them. I think we do need more spaces, though, that folks can get to that doesn't cost money, because I know a lot of folks try to find, you know, anywhere to hold events. pre-COVID, and that was always a little bit of an issue with intersectionality because people don't really have the money to shoot or the space for it, but just base building is a good starting spot.
Thanks, Renee. Sorry, thanks, Amber. And one of the things that comes to mind when you talk about that is, you know, connected with reclaiming land and reclaiming buildings. And so for me, as the Community Land Trust, one of the things that I want to see us do is reclaim some of this vacant land that maybe the city owns, the county owns, or whoever, and have those gatherings there, build that community there. And so it's in the neighborhood, so it's accessible, and it's really a different kind of gathering space as well, to create that base, like you're saying, and to build a trust and have a really welcoming space that people feel comfortable to come to and share their ideas. I'm going to go to Julia for this question.
Okay, there's spaces everywhere. Like Renee says, there's East End, there's Burton Street. There's always already spaces for this to happen. All they have to do is reach out. Let's have a meeting here. I mean, the city here. I mean, if we give you $500 or $200 for you to get some food or get some flowers or whatever to have this meeting here, let's have this meeting here. There's places already set in place for this to happen. Pisgah View, they have a resident council thing too. So I mean, there's places there. All they have to do is reach out to it and do something for them, because everything is in place. All the meeting place for us are already there. Pisgah View have a place. All the places are there. All we have to do is just meet. I think and trust, just like Amber said, has to be a trust. And the only way to make trust is to just reach out, do something that nobody else has done. I mean, it's time to put all this aside and do something too as well. I mean, come on. I mean, it seems like we're just talking and talking. I'm just ready for something to happen. My grandfather was a slave. I mean, he suffered. I mean, and then it goes on from there. I'm come from suffering and I'm still suffering. So it's time for this suffering to stop. I mean, you know, in 10 days, I'll be 59 years old. And, you know, it's time to stop suffering and trust.
Right, absolutely. And you know, I think a lot of it is making sure that we're not reinventing the wheel, making sure that we recognize the work that has happened in the communities, and just making sure that we're building on that work and involving people. Ms. Renee, I see you're off of mute. Do you want to chime in here?
Just to say that and I have to say that there've been some village roundtable meetings with the county. There's been some table meetings with the city through Brenda Mills. So those type of spaces and places, they have started to come together. So, and I also think that coming out, like Julia said, out to these communities and these neighborhoods sometimes would help to build trust, and would help us all to collectively, because at the end of the day, we're all as Black people in the same boat, poor and need money. I mean, you know, our economic impact is 0 to none almost. And so I think that all of us coming together, looking at our common goals, which will be basically the same for just about all of us, and figuring out what we can do to support each other in trying to obtain some of these goals, and what directions we need to go in is going to be the key. And I'm with, like Rob said, I'm with Hillcrest, I'm with PVA, and granted, I agree, it's not about just our neighborhoods, it's about all of our neighborhoods of color in the city and Buncombe County, because we are all struggling. And so I think that there are some efforts being made thus far to try to bring us all together. I think the Land Trust is a great start, as we're looking at affordable housing for everybody. And, you know, people can get on these bandwagons, come together and try to come up with some workable solutions to these problems.
And I just want to briefly mention for those of you who might be new to the Community Land Trust, or this is your first event with us. So the way that a Community Land Trust works is it separates the land from the structure or the improvement to the land. So the building that's on the land, whether that's housing, commercial, community space, it could be any number of things, but the land is separated and kept in trust with the organization. And the organization is really managed by the community, if you will. So at least 2/3 of our board is community members that live either in the houses that we sell or in the communities that are directly impacted. And so that land is kept with the organization, and the decisions about that land are made by the very community members in those communities. So I just kind of want to give that background a little bit. I think we have Rob left for this very last question. I'm sorry if I've missed anybody, but Rob, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, so the question was, how do we work together? Is that correct?
Yeah, really about increasing collaboration and coming together as residents, as organizations, and working towards a collective goal.
Yeah, I think that is a, you know, the answers already given are pretty much spot on. Only thing that I would like to add to that is empowering the community, and that looks like many different things. As far as that's what this is about for me, is, you know, complete empowerment of the community to give them back their power to advocate for themselves and create their own decisions. I think we as a people have forgotten, you know, how much power it is that we do have, and not only our collective force, but the power that is waiting to join up with ours. You know, there's a massive amount of progressive white people in Asheville that will definitely back up and support the things that we need. This is really in our hands. We, like what Ms. Renee said and what Ms. Julia said, we gotta come together and figure this out collaboratively. That is the only way forward. That is the only thing that I have been saying. Also, you know, me, myself, and I, you know, I'm only one man, and I know that without everybody that's around me and without community, we wouldn't have gotten anything done. And the only way forward is even more collaboration and more collective effort. And we have to build the trust between us. And that looks like working together. You getting to know me getting to know you, and being on the battlefield together. And you knowing and seeing how I move, so that whenever a false narrative is out there and you've already been around me and felt my energy and judged my character, you already know that I'm not even about that type of stuff. So it's got to happen. And what is so hard for me right now is this coronavirus. But, you know, me personally, I will be out in community next week and probably like for 5 or 6 weeks straight on the front lines. It is what it is. Like, it has to happen. Has to.
Thank you, Rob. And yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, we have shifted and gone virtual, but some of this work just can't be done virtually, and you got to get out there and you got to make those connections. And you know, for us, and especially myself being new to the organization, I'm just dying to get out there and meet more people and make those connections so we can move the needle forward. I want to make sure I gave everybody an opportunity. Did I miss anybody on that last question? I got everybody? All right. Well, we are right at time, but I just want to make sure that we take some questions from the audience. I don't think there were a whole lot that came in the chat. Latoya was monitoring the questions that came in the chat, but you all are welcome to unmute yourself, turn your video on, ask any questions that you have. We'll just go on for a few more minutes. This is a really important conversation. I see Elizabeth is saying that in the chat. And so we really just want to wrap it up and make sure we answer your questions and leave on a high note with some actionable items for how to move forward. So if anybody wants to unmute and ask your questions, or if LaToya, there are a couple that you want to bring up from the chat, please do.
So this is LaToya. I will do the most recent question from Renee. What kinds of policy changes and or structural changes do you support or need to happen here in Asheville? I'll read that again. What kinds of policy changes and or structural changes do you support or need to happen here in Asheville?
So this is, thank you, LaToya. This is one of the conversations I recently touched on a little bit with Amber and Rob. So Amber, I'm going to ask you to jump in, and anybody else that wants to answer that, please.
Do you want to start, Rob?
Sure. Man, there are several policies. Let's look at one institution, structural change. Lending institutions, for one, you know, after 2008, with the housing market crash, receiving a mortgage became extremely more difficult, to whereas several policies were created to whereas to verify your income, you needed several more types of information. They do a lot more research, and I think this should be done. We should change these lending institutions policies equitably to counteract some of the things that have happened historically. To whereas, you know, I hear people like, how do we repair some of the damages that were, you know, done over the past 100, 200 years? And it's like, well, look at the harm that was caused and do the opposite of it. You know, it's really not that hard to do. So let's look at some of these policies within lending institutions, such as, you know, having to have a certain amount of time working, or like for me in my instance, having to be a contract employer for 2 years before you are willing to verify my income. I mean, you can look at my bank statements, you can look at my bill payments, my credit is like a little bit over 700. There are several other things that you can look at. So actually having case managers within these banks that take a closer look at individuals to assess whether or not they can qualify for mortgages. To whereas, you know, there are several individuals that I know that their mortgage would literally be the same as what they already pay in rent, or a few $100s more. And as far as structural change, like I said, the demographic makeup of various institutions within the housing market, whether we're talking about real estate brokers, whether we're talking about the lending institutions themselves, I mean, that makes a big difference. When I go into the bank and, you know, I have to face implicit bias and they look at me and think as if I'm a drug dealer, like I can feel that. That makes a huge difference in the outcome. To whereas, well, we might as well not even check your credit score. We probably won't be able to verify your income, or different things. Like, there are things that loan officers can do within banks to get around certain systems. Like, for instance, the 1% from a college debt, you know, college loan debt. They can also go off a payment plan that you have, but it is their option. They have the option to use that 1% and deny you, but they also have the option to look at the payment plan that you're on, say like $50 a month instead of 1% of your total college loan debt, which could be $5,000 a month added to your debt to income ratio. So I mean, like, implicit bias and everything else plays a large role in the outcomes that we as people of color face within Asheville. And like what Miss Julia was saying, like, they can look at her situation and provide her with adequate housing. Like, that's ridiculous that she has to go through that. And I know so many others in the same situation as her. Like that's crazy. And that's I mean, as far as direct policies and the wording around them, like I don't have that lined out, but there's a lot of them pertaining to everything that I just stated.
Amber, do you want to add to that? Go ahead.
I mean, I would like to see some progressive policies, especially if we're talking about reparations. I think like some of the land that the city owns from urban renewal, I think that, you know, there's a lot of people with skills, and if the city could give, you know, like lease-free storefronts for people to bring money into their pockets. Just one random idea. I would just like to see real change, that things that we haven't seen done yet, but I don't see any reason why it can't be done necessarily.
I like to comment on that too. I like to see it a policy that developers are not allowed to do all the things they do and always get the first dibs on any available property, and then come in and build houses that nobody can afford in these neighborhoods or anywhere else. And then I've seen them take the affordable housing credit and then build the structures and then give the money back that they receive for supposedly making 10% of the units affordable, and then jack the rent up and nothing's affordable. So I like to see some policy changes when it comes to what a developer is allowed to do and build in these neighborhoods, and hold them accountable. If they're supposed to have affordable, they should have affordable. And the next thing is that structurally, I'd like to see, and I agree with Rob 100%, make it easier for our Black businesses to open up, or somebody to open up a business and not have to jump through hoops and loops and out the Jeff Bowen Bridge to get money enough to be able to even open a business, a Black business in this city. And then the other thing is to put money into our neighborhoods that will assist these neighborhoods in making life better for the residents that are in them. People like Julia, provide adequate place for her to stay, because it's not right that we have residents in the city of Asheville who are having to live like that. And even with Rob, you know, out here just working it and can't afford to have a 4 or 5 bedroom house for him and all of his children and his family. It makes no sense. It's to me, our residents are being outpriced right out of the city, taxes continuously going up, and therefore people who do have the homes or whatever living are getting pushed out, and there needs to be some changes with that. So, I mean, I could go on and on about policy and structure, but those are some of the big issues and concerns that I currently have.
Thank you, Ms. Renee. And I see Darcel just put a comment or a question in the chat talking about transferring housing to the land trust specifically. She's asking about public housing. But I do just want to go back to kind of relating it to the community land trust, and Renee, to your very last point about taxes. And so again, I'll just kind of explain a little bit that separating the land from the structure on the land also means that, well, first it means that the home buyer of that house is not paying for the land. So the cost of the home itself is significantly reduced. And so that's one of the ways that we really hope that we can get more people into housing, because that kind of alleviates the increasing prices. So we're taking the cost of the land out, which is of course usually why the value of the house and the cost of the house is going up. But the other important piece of that is that the tax of the value of the land is also taken from out of that equation. And so the homeowner, the owner of the structure, doesn't pay taxes on the land. They only pay taxes on the structure itself. So that's very important, again, to keep people in place, and coming back to this development without displacement. conversation, making sure that people are able to get in, again, with that lower price point coming into the housing, but also able to stay in the housing because they're not burdened with the increasing taxes of both the land and the structure. And so that's just one of the ways that we're able to address some of the items that you all are talking about. I just want to go to Julia real quick, if you have any thoughts on this, and then I'll turn it back to Latoya for any more questions from the chat.
Well, you said the policy of one thing, they need to change it, because if they would have based it on my credit score is good. So I'm just saying, other than looking at me and looking at my past, if you want to change some policies, change that to where it is easier for me. I'll speak for myself, for me to get into a place. Just make it easier for me. I mean, because like I said, my credit score is good. It's 600 and something. So I mean, if that's good, and that's what they usually, if you go certain places, this is what they look at, your credit score. So if my credit score is good, so why are you going back on something that happened 10 years ago? I'm just saying, change the policy so I can get somewhere decent. I think it's time, at least before I get 60, I want to move into a new place of some kind. I've lived in housing all my life. I think I deserve this. And I don't think it should be counted against me at all. That's all I can say.
Absolutely. Thank you, Julia. Thank you, everyone else. No, we are over time, so I do want to start wrapping it up. Latoya, are there any other burning questions from the chat, or does anybody want to chime in with maybe one last question before we end for tonight? And again, this is just the start of the conversation. This is our very first virtual events, our first event all year. And we know that more conversations need to be had. We will have more of these conversations. We will also have more conversations about community land trusts in particular, and what we're doing now and hope to be doing into the future.
I had a quick question, if that's okay.
Please.
I typed, hold on, let me find it. Where did I put it? Hold on, sorry. I gotta go back.
Hurry up.
Basically,
see
I
it.
was saying,
Latoya, you got it?
I just have to give her
I do.
energy. I'm sorry. I love her energy.
I miss you. No, Julia was saying that she was going to collect stories, and then we had this movie here, and I was wondering, like you all were talking about teaching like the youth and stuff, like could we have a story, now we're all virtual schooling and the kids are home, but maybe we could get some teens together for this movie that we watched and some stories from just folks, and like make like a teen event, like, I don't know, have ice cream or something. And it doesn't have to be huge, but like 20 kids or so, I don't know. Like that, I think it would be something we could do right now, that like, teaching kids locally the history of what's going on, and then you could maybe even tailor it to what's going on in Asheville, Could you do something like that, is what I'm saying.
Sure. Yes, we can talk about it. We can do that. We can do that.
And I think that, of course, gets to the point that this isn't taught in schools, right? So we have to do our part to make sure that the adults, but also the kids, are learning this instead of waiting until they become adults, and even later in life until they hear about this for the first time. I do just want to make one last plug for the Community Land Trust, something that we're starting to do in kind of this movement that we're looking to build and collaborate with you all, is to have community ambassadors. So we think it's really important to have people in the communities where we are doing the work to be ambassadors of the work that we're doing and other people are doing as well. And we also think it's really crucial to compensate people for their time and energy and talents and efforts. And so we have some grant funding available as well to be able to compensate those community ambassadors. And so we're currently planning some training sessions to really dive deeper into what is a community land trust, what is our organization, what are we doing specifically, and train people on the model, and then have those community residents become ambassadors and really kind of spread the message and spread the work and help with our future events as well. And this was intentionally for in-person events. We really want to have, facilitated table conversations, and maybe we'll do some breakout rooms in the future. But again, this is just our first event. So we're just starting the conversation, and I really want to thank all of the panelists for a great discussion. Thank you, audience, for joining us tonight. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for all your comments in the chat. I'm really happy to meet a lot of you virtually that I haven't already met. We look forward to seeing you at our next event. And I think with that, I will end. I see Renee is asking to be added to the newsletter. And so I'll just go ahead and say, if you're interested in being added to our newsletter, the fastest way to do that is to go to our website, abclt.org. Scroll down to the bottom of our homepage and you'll see a little box that says join our newsletter. So just put your information in there and you'll automatically be added. That's the fastest way for you to get information. So thank you, everybody. Sorry we were over time, but really good conversation, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks to all the panelists, and thanks to the Land Trust. Good night.
So have a good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, and thank you very much.
Good
Hey,
night.
Rob, contact me.
Good night, everyone. Thank you all for coming.
Good
Thank
night.
you, Kate.